very much, Mark and Gordon and Noha. I love the talk of creativity. I love the imagination, the vitality that each of you bring to the topic. I'm going to call an audible because we are a little over time. I'm going to call an audible here and get right into the discussion if we can, and go to the audience with a couple of questions from Pigeonhole. And I'm going to combine a couple of questions. These are the two most popular questions thus far from Pigeonhole. And the first, we're in the midst of a housing crisis. My children will not likely be able to afford to raise their families here. Local business and community support personnel can't live here. How do we fix this? And I'm going to combine that with, this community has historically been change resistant. Mm-hmm. How can we get citizens on board with the need for more affordable housing to accommodate a more economically diverse population? And of course, those are two really closely connected questions. And so bringing us back to reality now, where are the fixes? Gordon, do you want to start off with there?
I'll start with the easiest question first, I'm sure. The resistance to change is a really important thing to talk about and be clear about. And look for what's behind that. What is it we don't like to change? And humans don't like change. But if we want, for instance, to see Ambleside sustain itself over time, inevitably there needs to be change. And I think that part of the resistance to change begins to be weakened when people realize the extent to which they and their families will benefit from even small incremental changes. So for instance, the children of West Vancouverites who can't afford to live in the community, if we're able, as Noha outlined, to think of different approaches to creating more affordable housing, and we put it within walking distance of Ambleside, then we've done a couple of things. We've reduced the need to use your car to get places. You're on a transit route. You've got housing choices. And there was, in Noha's presentation, a lot of talk quite correctly about different forms, scales, and densities. I try to avoid talking about density, and I would rather talk about more complete communities that are walkable and accessible for all. And if we can do that, I think we begin to tackle the challenge of creating more affordable, accessible, and appropriate housing. And that's could lead to a whole discussion about scale of housing, how much space does a family need. And if we think about tackling these problems not as, here's a big solution, let's do it, but it's an incremental approach to solving the problem. And if you get to solve or address housing affordability while saving Ambleside and making it better than it's ever been, by combining the two issues, I think you've gone a long way towards changing and making changes that people are going to find they're very comfortable with.
No?
Well, that was pretty nicely put by Gordon, but I think to reiterate the presentations, all of them talked about, what makes great neighborhoods, and if we already know what makes a great neighborhood and we know what's involved with that, then it should be straightforward to then take the next step and take the leap of accepting that these are local issues. If we have a say and involved in the process, then we should be part of that evolution of our communities to create that great neighborhood, create those great places to live in, those places for our kids, for our grandparents. These are local problems. So I think it's a difficult question about how to get there, because ultimately it's about the community accepting that it needs to get there, and local council championing these issues, and it's about it's about leadership, I think, at the end of the day. But also I think it is about having that voice and feeling like your voice is heard and that you have an opportunity to contribute to shaping those places and shaping those housing forms. And if it's about creating a diversity of housing options, let's not use the D word, but if we want to create choice, you have to diversify the supply and diversify the tenure options, and there's ways to do that, but we need to support that and embrace that and encourage it.
Mark, I'm going to change it up a little bit in that I recently read an article where a woman was quoted, a young woman who had lived in Vancouver, and she moved, and you may even know the story, and she wrote this article saying that and I'm going to paraphrase, but she didn't actually leave Vancouver, Vancouver left her. And
Right.
I read that, and I thought, I'm afraid that if we don't start to do certain things in West Vancouver from a planning perspective, that's going to happen here, because all of the people that work in our shops, young people that grow up here, go to school here, and then go away to university, become lawyers and doctors, and still can't afford to live in the community where they grew up. And I think you mentioned seniors wanting to downsize, all those things. It becomes a real crisis. So you saw that the population of West Vancouver actually went down between the last census. And so that's going to be a real concern here in the community. And bringing it back to this Ambleside discussion, how do we use the planning and good planning and that creativity, Mark, that you talk about, to really address some of those issues?
Well, it won't surprise anybody that I think creativity is going to be at the core of that. These problems are real. They're getting worse. There's so many things I want to say. There's one of the things about, I've done some work over here on the North Shore, and in the West Vancouver context, one of the things that you folks don't want to hear is there's a lot of housing stock over here. There's a ton of places for people to live. The problem is, or a challenge is, that these giant 5,000 square foot houses, which are some of that stock, are sitting empty or sitting with a very small amount of people in them, and the creativity that would allow that to be turned into a co-housing situation or incentivized to be developed in other ways. Nobody has shown the bravery yet to put that forward and say, look, this is the leadership that needs to occur. This is where some of these opportunities could come from. Is it the be-all, end-all and the solution to all of it? Absolutely not. But it's changing, right? We need to rethink what housing is. Those giant homes, sorry guys, they're immoral.
Gordon?
They're immoral. Yeah. Did I just get clapped for
You did.
saying immoral?
You did.
For calling
Good.
people immoral?
giant
So-
wow.
I don't think
West
any
Vancouver.
conversation about housing in this market or any other markets facing the kind of pressures we are can be had without making it a conversation about the economy,
Yep.
about employment, about transit and transportation. Political leadership focusing on housing, as we've seen so much of in the last few years, particularly in Vancouver, but throughout the region, misses the point that we have the lowest median income of any big city in Canada and the highest housing prices. Not sustainable. So I had a different reaction when I read the piece on Vancouver Has Left Me. I thought, what a whinger. We all have an obligation and responsibility to help build our community. Many of us came from other places, and we've come here and we've invested in the city. And yes, it's challenging, but we need to focus that energy that's now drifted in that particular case off to Calgary on the issues here. And we need to build an economy that is more than an economy driven by construction. We have to have a diversified economy. We have to have an economy that can withstand economic cycles, and we don't. And so any conversation about housing better also be a conversation about the economy and jobs and how we pay people. Because if we aren't paying people, if we're not creating jobs that are filled by well-qualified people who will be reasonably and well-paid, the conversation about housing will disappear because there will be lots of empty houses, there will be lots of people leaving. And so it's about the economy.
I think I'd like to just add a comment about housing as well, because it's about housing in a Canadian context is about enabling the private market to build houses for us. But I think we need to look at this situation a little bit differently. And And all of us do have a role to contribute and enable the private market, but also the public sector and partnerships in between to create a variety of options. And so some of those creative solutions, they're not going to happen on their own. We have to make them happen. We have to facilitate that kind of change. And it all might sound a little bit abstract, but there are tools out there that we can use, and there's a lot of great examples of projects and programs. We just need to come together creatively to find those solutions collectively, and have to be willing to take that forward. And it's not just about the straight up cookie cutter condo buildings that look the same, 1 and 2 bedroom units. We need to be different in how we're developing housing in our communities, if they're going to be great, if they're going to be great places to live and great places to visit and work in.
A couple of you mentioned political leadership, and I just wanted to acknowledge and thank that I think we've got virtually our entire council here tonight, and I think that's quite indicative of the type of leadership that we have here in the community. They're actually here and interested enough to be here this evening. So thank you very much to our councillors for actually being here. So when you go back to Ambleside, remembering that that's the topic, and you look at the opportunities in Ambleside for future development, how do you encourage our political leadership and the private sector to talk about that type of housing that we think we might need here in West Vancouver that we don't have today?
Well, it's going to be more than just housing, right? The town center concept. But we're doing a number of projects right now in various municipalities throughout BC and a few back east, and there's this interesting tension. And despite the fact that I am, I'm all public participation and community engagement forward and very progressive in that sense, and I believe truly in tapping into the collective genius of this community. These are experts in their lived experience. They are experts in their values, and that is crucial for a politician to understand, and so they can represent their constituency. But there is a role, and there needs to be a place for specialists who know the impact of what happens, and I've seen a number of engagement, air quotes, campaigns spin out of control and head to referendum and because the same 28 people show up and scream and yell. So, you can vilify politicians for certain things at certain times, but when they make bold moves to do the right thing, I think that they need to be prepared to do so. They need to engage experts like my panelists here, not me, and make the right call, and sometimes do some very uncomfortable things. The mayor of Vancouver has done some very questionable things in a lot of people's opinion, but he's also done some very brave things that he's taken and his council have taken a tremendous amount of flack for. And in recent times, if you're following what's happened down in Chinatown, there's so much concern over the culture and character of that neighborhood that twice now a major development has actually been axed and denied because there was a really viable community groundswell of opinion. And so that's the kind of bold stuff that I think has to happen and can happen here. I mean, look at you people. We got this. You got your politicians sitting in the room. You got this.
Yeah. But, go ahead.
No, you go.
Well, just back to that question about how you get there. I mean, developers aren't going to get us there by themselves. So first, we know what we know what we need. People know what they want, what we're short of, and what type of housing, what type of communities we want to live in. So if we ask the right questions, then it's about incentivizing and supporting the development community, and I think the nonprofit sector and the public sector to facilitate great communities and great housing and great public places. So it's about asking the questions, I guess, and then looking at the tools that are available to you and creating those incentives and the policies and initiatives to, give that push for development to go in the direction that you need it to go. But again, at the end of the day, if you don't have that leadership and you don't have the support from your local council and the neighborhood and the people that live there coming out and championing and supporting projects, then it's going to be hard to, it'll be an uphill battle at every step.
Everything's uphill here.
Yeah.
This conversation will keep coming back to that issue of resistance to change. So we need to make the change seem positive and be positive. And that is through that process of engagement.
Yeah.
I think I was at an event a week ago, Monday night, in another unnamed municipality in the Lower Mainland, where we got a third of the people that are here tonight, and we had no local politicians. And we were talking about a really crucial local issue. So I think this is really a great start, and it doesn't surprise me in West Vancouver that everybody's out to talk about Ambleside. And I think that's a credit to the spirit of the community. Some communities don't have what you have. Start there with that as a building block. Keep working with council, and don't discourage developers from looking at opportunities in the community at all scales. So I mentioned earlier Cressy's project and Grosvenor's project. There's also the work that Michael Geller is doing in West Vancouver, and it's really important work because it's at a scale that is small enough to fit into a neighborhood. It's proof you can do it. And I'm assuming, Michael, there was an adequate market for that, and you were able to sell those units and whet the appetite of others in the community to do more of that. And scale is crucial. University would still be thinking about getting it started if we hadn't taken an incremental approach to the building of that community. Make no small plans, but start with the first piece and keep adding to it. And so I think projects like Michael's, and there are others in the community that are really important to focus on. That's how we're going to bring about change, how we're going to introduce more affordable housing, how we're going to introduce housing choice. We're going to continue to contribute to the walkability of the community, plan for the very young, and you plan for everyone. And so what's nearby that is needed in the community? The school, the child care center, the drugstore, the liquor store, as we discovered, on and on. Those things all need to be there. And you can't get it all at once, but the lovely thing about Ambleside is it's got great bones. There's already a great infrastructure in place. So we're talking about adding to that. And in adding to it, we'll change the form, we'll change the character. But I think it'll all be to the good. And if we can accommodate more people within walking distance, so those households that only have one person, 28% of the households in this municipality only have one person, wouldn't it be great if 10 years from now we're sitting and talking about how many more people we've added, like Noha's example in her neighborhood, where 2 houses disappeared and you've got 9 row houses, and they're full of families with young kids. That's where you want to get. That's the goal.
So one of the other issues did you want to add to that? No. One of the other issues that we have, and you've talked about it somewhat, is the question around transportation, transit.
Yeah.
And we have some unique situations here. We live on the side of a hill by the ocean. There's a lot of communities here where you have to get in a vehicle of some sort to get to where you want to be able to walk, whether it's be restaurants or shops or your doctor's office or whatever. And so when you look at a community like West Vancouver, where everybody is so focused on driving, how do you use this concept of a town center to try to accommodate that or to respond to that need?
The glib answer is watch next year on Commercial Drive when they have the car-free day and how many people drive over there to enjoy the car-free day. It's okay to drive. I drive. I have more than one car. But you drive and you walk. So I could look, but I think I walked about 8,500 steps today in downtown Vancouver going from meeting to meeting to meeting. If I don't have to cross a bridge, I don't get out my car. It's kind of an easy rule. But I think we need to think about if West Vancouver is roughly 40,000 people, and it's, let's be charitable, and it's a flat population. It's declined a tiny bit statistically in 5 years, but it should warn us that that could be a trend. It isn't yet, but it might be. But if we could get a quarter of the population of West Vancouver walking, living close enough to Ambleside to be able to walk, which would make it roughly the size of the community we're building at University, on Burnaby Mountain, that would be a huge accomplishment. If 1 in 4 West Vancouverites lived within striking distance of Ambleside, that's pretty good. Mm-hmm. You're not going to get people to come off the mountain out of the properties and walk here. They walk down fine, but they're not going to walk home. So that's not the problem we're trying to solve. What we're trying to solve at the moment is the achievement of a collective vision for what Ambleside can and should be to meet the needs of as many West Vancouverites as it can. Mm. And then let the rest of the people drive by and think, damn, I wish I lived there. It looks so appealing and so attractive, and they don't use their cars much. But that's for later. Mm. Let's work on, say, a quarter of your population over the next 10, 15 years living within walking distance and in and of the community. I think that would do it. I got one too. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, it's about both. You need that local population, that local resident population that creates that vitality in that neighborhood, that gives it life all 24 hours of the day. Well, maybe not all 24 hours, but most of the time.
It's West Vancouver.
It is West Van after all. And then the rest of the time, people will drive. It'll be a destination because it'll be an incredible place that you want to come visit. It is already an incredible place that people like to come visit, but it could be even better.
Are you done?
Is there a car share over here?
Yeah.
Like car to go? I could have taken a car to go here?
Oh, no.
No?
No.
There's a lot of no's over there.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we don't.
I rest my case, Your Honor.
I don't know why. I don't know why. But I mean, those things should be available in West Vancouver. One of the big problems that we have in West Vancouver is that we need to. You talk about quality of life. Mm. That's really what this should be all about, right? It's the quality of life of your citizens. And the problem is that most of our citizens feel, or they used to feel, that they'd have to go over town to do their business, whatever. And we're a bedroom community. That's what we do. That's who we are, a bedroom community. Well, what's happened now is that it's becoming more and more and more difficult to actually make that trip. Mm-hmm. And it's not because of our population growth. Our population came down. Mm-hmm. So it's the Sea to Sky Highway, it's the Sunshine Coast, it's the BC ferries, it's all of this other volume that's coming through our community that all of a sudden is sort of putting the squeeze on us, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's why it's so important to have these discussions so that we develop our community in a way that we don't have to go over town so much. And that's restaurants, and that's entertainment, and that's services, and it's all those things.
And it's a design problem. I mean, it's curious, there's these funny dichotomies that exist in active design principles, like the connection between having places to sit and increased walkability. If you put benches where people would sit down, they walk more and sit less. Every time. So you can actually design, as long as there's an excuse and there's a rhythm and there's a cadence to the why I would go and there's things for me to do and I can cluster activities and then you can design that space such that they'll drive down the hill and spend the whole afternoon there, which would be fantastic.
Right, right.
So my old friend Gordon Price used to say, and still does when asked, he will say, congestion is our friend. Mm-hmm. And that has certainly been, to some extent, true in various parts of the region. I think it is particularly true in Ambleside. That congestion actually will drive business to Ambleside. Yep. If you've tried, and I've tried many times to come on a Saturday in particular from the city over here to an art event, and I give up around Denman Street and turn around and go back. So you've got a captive market in a way that you haven't had since the upper levels was built. And so if you go back to that history I was outlining, the opening of Park Royal, the opening at the end of the ferry, the opening of Park Royal, the upper levels, Lionsgate Bridge, all of a sudden you're kind of back to where you were. as a relatively self-contained, complete community. Much of it is walkable, more of it could be by putting more housing within walking distance. And don't bother trying to go over town, you know? It's all here. And that's where Park Royal stops being a competitor and a big box that sucks away money from the street and begins to help you because it balances out what can be offered on Marine Drive and Bellevue, and it helps you. Congestion helps you. Having that big anchor there finally will help Ambleside by keeping all that retail activity
Being local.
here. Keep it local.
You know, we're running desperately short of time here, but I'm going to ask one more question that's up here, and the most popular question left on the board. It's likely more appropriately asked of our counselors who are here, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway for this group, and it is, since we are a seaside community, why has there been no consideration for attracting development of a proper marina with shops and restaurants at the Ferry Building Pier and West Van Sailing Club space? So you likely don't know why that hasn't actually been done, but I mean, that sort of attraction in a community like this could be a pretty vital part of what we're talking about, walkable space, enjoying those sorts of assets right here.
You have an incredible asset with the waterfront, and you know, so many people come to Ambleside to walk the seawall, dip their feet, and you know, go to the playground right on the water. I mean, it's an incredible resource, an incredible asset, and if you use the waterfront and the water as well as the land base to create your incredible community, it'll only enhance everything else we've been talking about. And it sounds like there's some pretty cool ideas about how
I'll bid you
to
on that.
achieve that.
Give me $6 million. Done.
So,
Okay.
It's a community
you know,
amenity
back to the
contribution.
future. Why not reintroduce the ferry?
Yeah.
Then you're back at the crossroads. The whole conversation about the Agora, place to shop, place to meet people and to talk, comes back. And again, congestion supports that very nicely. A passenger ferry to downtown would be phenomenal for Ambleside.
I agree.
So, yes, protect the seawall, the waterfront, the shoreline, bring in a ferry, kind of work on sustainability, resilience, and recreating the Ambleside as the crossroad.
Well, on that note, Gordon, thank you very much for that, because that's a great message for our counselors tonight. Their task now is to go out and encourage a ferry, I was going to say a ferry to the mainland. I don't know.
Listen,
We're not an island yet.
You are the mainland.
it's no crazier than a gondola
Getting there.
on Burnaby Mountain.
Yeah, you're
I was
absolutely
going to
right.
say, I wonder if
Just
you're
do
going to
it.
suggest it a gondola as well.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Would you join me in thanking our panelists? Thank you.
Wow, I can't believe how many amazing ideas and thoughts were brought up today, many more than I had ever thought of. On the car share question that came up, apparently we did have car share in West Vancouver. I think they were housed basically at Horseshoe Bay and recently taken away because of lack of usage. That's my understanding. It came up in a discussion a few weeks ago when we were with some friends and I asked the question, somebody gave me that answer. As we were considering going from a 2-car family to a 1-car family, which we just did last week. So I was thinking of options, and we don't have it. So apparently it's not because of any political issue, it's more so the demand apparently is not there. So that's the answer. You know, what came to my mind as I was hearing all of this, coming from a business background, what always was ingrained in my mind as a kid was if you bring value to your customer, they will continue to support you. And I couldn't help but trying to fit all of this dialogue tonight that we just heard, you know, in that sort of context, that if we bring value to Ambleside, even more value than what we already have, people will come. And I know there's lots of challenges, and it's a complicated thing to do all at once. It's going to take time. But it's venues like this and the enthusiasm of the residents of the community to come out and engage that's really going to help it happen. So on that note, a very big thank you again to Noha, Gordon, Mark, and Jess for sharing your insights and experiences with us this evening. Another big round of applause. Thank you. Before you dash, we do have a small parting gift for you as a token of the Society's appreciation, so we'll get to that in a minute. But for those of you who'd like to continue this discussion, there's good news for you. As many will be aware, the district will be working with the community to prepare a plan for Ambleside. This district-led process, not society-led, is about to launch and will be a highly collaborative process with many opportunities for people to get involved. There will be a web page and ads in the North Shore News shortly, so more information is forthcoming. And finally, you will be receiving a short survey by tomorrow morning in your email box. Please take a minute to fill it out, as your feedback is certainly appreciated. Ladies and gentlemen, it's 9 p.m. This brings us to the forum to a close. Thank you and good night.